Well, there goes Ben Johnson, the highly sought-after Detroit Lions offensive coordinator and perhaps the top target for Tom Brady and the Raiders, is officially becoming the head coach of the Chicago Bears. So now what? Is Pete Carroll the answer? What type of coach should Las Vegas be looking for? The panel is ready to answer all of these questions and more. Sin City Beat starts right now.
From Las Vegas, this is Sin City Beat.
Well, hello and welcome to Sin City Beat. I'm Mike Davis. Thanks so much for joining us. Sin City Beat is the show that dissects the Vegas sports world through the eyes of the sports reporters and storytellers leading the charge. Joining the action today, we have Case Kiefer, sports editor of the Las Vegas Sun, Q Myers of ESPN Las Vegas and host of Unnecessary Roughness on Raider Nation Radio. And we got a newbie, Mark Anderson, sports reporter with the Associated Press. Great to have you guys with us. It's going to go a lot smoother than that fist bump for the rest of the show.
That was his fault,
sure.
That was my fault.
I
came in high.
Okay, good. You're coming in hot and high. Listen, guys, we got some news, some breaking news to start the show off with. Adam Schefter reported that the Raiders have, in fact, signed GM John Spytek, the assistant general manager currently with Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He is now becoming the head general manager here with the Las Vegas Raiders. Q, let's start off with this. John Spytek, he's known to have a relationship with Tom Brady, played outside linebacker at the University of Michigan. Of course, had a big role bringing Tom Brady into the fold with Tampa when they won that Super Bowl. What do you think about this signing?
I think it's a really good one. It's one that's been rumored for a while, but it's also one that if you go back and look at the track record of what they do in Tampa Bay, he's had played a big role in helping kind of construct that roster. So he's one of the sharper minds. I mean, just doing a little bit of research, he's considered one of the better guys to be the next GM, big-time GM in the league, does everything through the draft, fills in some free agents here and there when they need to fill some holes, but mainly it's building through the draft as teams should be constructed. So I think it's a really good hire.
I really like it. This is a guy who's known as a great evaluator of talent. What's your guys' thoughts just on Spytek real quick?
I echo what Q said. I think this is a great hire. To me, even when they were bringing the GMs first, I thought he was the best candidate. However, I think the focus was on Ben Johnson. That was their number one. That's what they wanted to get done. And if they brought him in, I think they were going to give him a little more say, maybe bring in someone different. But I thought Spytek was the guy. I mean, he has 2 Super Bowl rings. You could say, oh, what did he really do? He was an assist on both of those, but he was a defensive guy for the Broncos. They had that great defense that won the Super Bowl. And look what he's done in Tampa. No one expected Tampa to be at this level the last 2 years after Brady went. So I think the GM hire, you got to give him a thumbs up.
Okay, and we're going to be coming back to Ben Johnson in a second, but real quickly, Mark, your thoughts, Spytek, do you like this?
Yeah, I mean, the Bucs are one of the better run organizations in the league. They've won their division 4 years in a row. Baker Mayfield was thought to be a bust not that long ago, and now he's a quarterback most teams would love to have. So they have a knack for looking for talent and seeing how it fits into what they want to do.
Yeah, could have been a Freudian slip there too, spying something there. But I think you were trying to say Spytek. One thing to note, though, Albert Breer with Amazon and Sports Illustrated also said that part of Brady's thing when he was with the Buccaneers is he would meet with the front office a lot of the time to game plan and do some advanced scouting, and Spytek was privy to a lot of those conversations and there for that, and he also implemented that after Brady left and did that along with Baker Mayfield. But let's go to the big splash of the week. So the big splash of this coaching cycle, in fact, just occurred. The Detroit Lions fell to the Commanders on Saturday night. 24 hours later, the Bears had hired their man. Ben Johnson stays in the NFC North and teams up with last year's #1 overall pick, quarterback Caleb Williams. So the Raiders miss out on Tom Brady's top target. Case losing out on Ben Johnson. Is it a big deal? And is it possible to really miss something you never had?
I think it's a big deal, but maybe it's not impossible to miss it. I do think there's some ways they can go now that are still good, but I think he was the top choice for a reason. He's the guy everyone wanted. I think he's a guy you could grow with. I think it was really close, too. I know there's a lot of anger and scorn and Raiders, like, oh, look, this guy left us. What were you doing? He was always going to go to the Bears. I don't think it was that way. I think it was really close, and obviously the Bears had Caleb Williams, had some advantages the Raiders didn't, but there were some things the Raiders could have done, too. So I think it does hurt, but now you got to regroup and see where you go from here, and I think they've made a good first move with the GM. We'll see what they do with the coach.
To me, it's interesting because I just never put too much credence into this because I couldn't believe Ben Johnson would come to a place without a quarterback.
Right, exactly, and that was a big deal. Nobody even thought he was going to take the interview. right? It was like, he's not going to take an interview with that team. But because Tom Brady got on the phone with his agent and was able to convince him after an hour conversation to even take the interview, it's like, okay, well, maybe the Brady effect is real to the point where it's a game changer, which it does seem like it was a game changer because it got him at the table with Ben Johnson. But going back to what we talked about earlier about John Spytek, I think that's the difference. If Ben Johnson does ultimately choose the Raiders, I don't think John Spytek's the GM, right? To Case's point, I think it's the guy Lance Newmark, right? The guy that's in with the Commanders right now, and he's probably going to team up with the Jets and Aaron Glenn. So yeah, I think that they missed out on him, but that doesn't mean that all hope is lost. They have other coaches they can get to.
Okay, Mark, do you think having a guy like Ben Johnson, would this have just been the miracle hire? Would this have been the savior that this organization was looking for? How depressed were you when you saw the notification that he was going to Chicago?
Well, I mean, it didn't really personally affect me.
Okay.
But
Depression kicked in, brother.
I went straight to Del Taco, just ordered everything on the menu. I was just compulsively eating. I went into a straight, deep, dark depression.
Yes, he was, I thought, the best candidate, but I didn't think he was necessarily a home run hire. There are a lot of problems with this roster. I don't, and would he be given whoever comes in, be given the time to really do what's necessary to build up this roster, not just quarterback, but throughout the roster. There's a lot of work to be done here. He's going to a much better situation in Chicago than he would here. And the fact he agreed to it, like 2 days after their season ended, makes me think they were pretty well down the line on that. So did he use the Raiders as leverage? Maybe, probably. But
I think that game on Saturday used the Raiders as leverage, right? Seeing the way that the Lions lost with Jared Goff and just being a good quarterback and not an elite quarterback, I think that also played a role.
It could have, yeah. But we've seen before the Raiders have brought in all sorts of different coaches who they said will turn around this organization. Maybe Ben Johnson would have, maybe he wouldn't have. We don't know. You never know. Sometimes it's a second choice or the third choice who comes in, and that really is the right coach. And that could happen here. Maybe they get someone to come in to be their head coach and who was maybe under the radar and no one's really excited, but a couple years down the road, you're looking like, man, they're kind of a pretty good competitive team right now. So you never know.
Nobody was fired up about Dan Quinn in Washington. Nobody. He was the last coach that was hired in the coaching cycle last year.
Right.
They're still playing.
Hey, you never know the fit. Well, guys, the new favorite seems to be former Seattle Seahawks head coach Pete Carroll. Consolation prize, or perhaps the exact coach the Silver and Black need. More on this after these words.
You're watching Sin City Beat.
The infectious energy, practicing not only football, but meditation, and of course, the tenacious gum chewing. It's all part of the Pete Carroll experience. What does Coach Carroll bring to the table? Well, the 72-year-old is a Super Bowl champion with Seattle, a 14-year tenure there that included 10 postseason appearances and a record of 137, 89, and 1. And back to the gum for just a moment. As you know, we're pretty detail-oriented here on Sin City Beat. What type of gum does Carroll chew, you ask? He once told Rich Eisen he chews 4 packs of bubble yum, the original pink bubblegum flavor, every game. So Q, tell us, why would Pete Carroll be the right hire for the Raiders, and why would he be the wrong hire for the Raiders?
I think he'd be the right hire because he's been there, done that. He knows what it looks like. He knows what it sounds like. He can create a culture. He can bring in a bunch of different guys from a bunch of different walks of life and get it all to work. Like what he did in Seattle with those guys, I like to call them choir boys and car thieves, right? Because it was such a blend of different characters that they had in that locker room. And as Richard Sherman told me on my radio show one day, that he just rolled the ball out and said, all right, the best 11 are going to play. I don't care where you got drafted. I don't care how much you make as free agency. If you can play, you're going to play. And so he created that competition, and the best guys got out there on the field. He made it real loose. He made the rules easy to follow, as Richard Sherman said. Just be on time. That was basically it. He said, we follow that most of the time. So, I mean, it's funny to hear that, but he creates that culture, that competitive culture as well, but also can relate to younger guys. Even though he's the oldest coach in the league, he can still have that mentality. So I just think for what the Raiders need, someone who's been there, done that, and can guide this ship and get it right back where it needs to go, I think he'd be a great hire for the job.
Yeah, he's definitely one of those guys. Age is not a number kind of thing.
Got more energy than me and you.
It's right, exactly. So he's well, Case, you're smiling.
Boy, here he
there.
comes.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
listen, you can't be hating on my dude Pete Carroll right now.
Get those fingers ready to send me some mean emails, throw some things at the TV. I do not think Pete Carroll would be a good hire. You cannot sell me on this right now. I'm not taking anything away from what he's done 20 years ago. Great hire. He's a Hall of Famer. He's done everything. But we're so colored by the beginning of that Seattle reign where he did overachieve, but he was kind of still more in his prime than they won a Super Bowl. Then look what happened year after year. With how good this team was by metrics, by like DVOA, expected points added, they should have won probably 2.5, 3 Super Bowls. You saw them give one away.
Should have had 2.
They kind of underachieved year after year, and he did not really grow with the times. They made really bad game management decisions. I feel like we're back with Antonio Pierce now. To me, it can work. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but with Antonio Pierce, I felt like you need to nail the offensive coordinator hire. Obviously, I think he'd be the first one to say that he didn't do that. I think if you hire Pete Carroll, you need to nail both coordinator hires, and then you're just flipping more coins. Oldest coach in NFL history. Age is more than a number.
No,
why put that B-roll back up?
Why does the age matter?
Case, look at that hair of Pete Carroll.
Why does the age matter? Why does the age matter?
Look, we've all been talking about how this is a long-term deal. He's the oldest coach in NFL history.
What's the long-term when it comes to a Raiders head coach? What's the longest a coach has been in place with the Raiders?
Yeah, the Raiders.
If you get 3 or 4 years at them, you win.
Well, that would be the longest in Las Vegas.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So you got to start somewhere. I mean, even, Jesus started with water before it became wine.
I'm not saying it couldn't work. I'm saying that he would be
I'm just saying, you got to start with a base.
Jesus and Pete Carroll. Two peas in the same pot.
Didn't expect that in the same sentence.
Mark, let me just ask you this, because this is my philosophy on the Pete Carroll thing, and, Case, take a deep breath for a second.
He's fired up, man.
He's fired up.
Listen, here's my thought. I think you got to get quarterback going here, right?
Yeah.
Without a quarterback, there's a lot of coaches that are not going to succeed. It doesn't matter if it's their first time around, how young they are, how great of a play caller they are. I think Pete Carroll is the one coach right now in this coaching cycle that could actually, no matter the quarterback situation, no matter what's going on there, this is a guy who can get this train on the right track. Do you agree?
He could. And I don't think age is a huge deal with him. He's just not your typical 73-year-old. He just isn't. The Raiders have a couple of ways they can go. They could make a dramatic move to trade up, maybe trade Max Crosby to move up, something along those lines, right? If they really want one of the top 2 quarterbacks, either Shadir Sanders or Cam Ward. If they really want to go that strong, they can make a move like that to move them there. The other thing they could do, they got about $100 million in cap space. They could say, we're not getting one of those 2 quarterbacks. We're not getting a top free agent. There's no top free agent quarterback. Right. Let's build the rest of the roster. Let's get the rest of the roster competitive, and then down the road next year, we'll make quarterback our priority. Yeah. That's the other option they can go. Okay. And if they go the second option, I think Pete Carroll makes a lot of sense.
All right, there you go, guys. Smart and emotionally intelligent, confident yet kind, strong and independent, reciprocal energy, enjoys long walks on the beach. Oh, hold up, wait. Those are the traits I'm looking for in a romantic partner. After the break, we're drawing up the perfect traits for the next Raiders coach. My bad, guys. I was thinking romantic for a second. That's it. So we all know the traits of Coach Pete Carroll, but what are the traits Raiders leadership should be prioritizing in their search? Do we need a QB guru or perhaps a culture guy? How about an expert offensive play caller? Mark, if you had to select a top attribute in our future head coach, what would it be and why?
I think the second one you mentioned, more of a culture builder, that's something that's lacking around this. I mean, the Raiders were known for having a strong culture during their glory days, and they lost that. So if they were just 1 or 2 pieces away from being true contenders, say they needed a top running back or something, you could go get a top offensive guy and say, that's our guy, and that would be a good answer. But they need someone who can look at the whole picture, and that's where maybe Carroll is really helpful.
Could you contend, though, and say that Antonio Pierce was supposed to be a culture guy? I mean, wasn't that
exactly?
what
You're reading my mind. Whatever happened to coaching searches going from extreme to extreme? We just had the culture guy. It didn't work. I think you need to go in a different direction. Maybe
did they give the culture guy enough time, though?
That's a good question. But then why do you bounce right into another culture guy?
Right.
Then he should have gotten another year.
I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
But it went beyond the culture with Antonio Pierce.
But it's a lot of it's back to the point that you made about the roster, right? I mean, Mike talked about, should you get a quarterback guru? You got to have a quarterback to have a quarterback guru.
Yeah.
What about zigging where everyone else zags? I know we go the great offensive play caller, the guy that's a schematic genius on that side of the ball, and that's kind of what's in style right now. But I look at the AFC West, it looks like these offenses are going to be so good for so long, and there's not really any of these guys on their list, but I feel like I'd be bringing in some guys that are defensively forward-thinking and doing good things. I think you can sell me on either side of the ball. I just want someone, if I was running an organization, that is either schematically brilliant on defense or offense. We'll see if the Raiders land on one of those.
Stability. How about stability? Someone who's stable, someone who's not crazy, right? I mean, seriously, think about it.
That.
Look, somebody that can, throw their stones on the table and say, hey, Andy Reid, hey, Jim Harbaugh, hey, Sean Payton, I can compete with you. I might not win every game, but I know that when I step into the arena that we're on the same playing field. We can still play with each other. That's the guy that I'm looking for, and that could be a Pete Carroll. That might have been a Ben Johnson if he got all the pieces he needs. That could be a Liam Cohen if he decides that he doesn't want to be the OC in Tampa Bay. There's other options out there, but you got to have someone that's stable, confident, and like I said, when they step into that ring, that square right there, they ain't scared of who's across from them.
I think it's an important thing, and I think it's a great point you bring up, Q, because you got to think about.
That was strong.
You got to. I think you got to think of the division. You got to think of the AFC West and who you're contending with. It's a different kind of thing to bring in somebody who might not have any experience, might not be able to contend with those coaches, and that's why I'm wondering if defense is the strategy, or if you got to go out and score points with this division that you're in.
You got to score. And going back to Case's point before about, having a guy that can help you advance and make the organization better. If you were to go in a Pete Carroll direction, the biggest hires will be his OC. Right? Who's going to be the OC, and how are you going to, Mark's point, get your quarterback and your skill players in the right position?
And you're going to get me fired up again.
Let's go, baby!
How well did he do with the OCs at the end of Seattle? Everyone wanted to run Schottenheimer out of town for years. He stuck around. Then they bring in Shane Waldron, who was a dasser. His offenses were such a letdown.
But he did well with Geno Smith. You did what? He did well with Geno Smith.
He did have the one decent year.
He got him a contract extension, which at one point he was left for dead.
Listen, let me just say this. I might be the least fluid in love on this panel. And Mark, I have interviewed your wife, your lovely wife, Paulette, many times, Speedway Children's Charities.
Thanks for the plug.
Yes, of course. Shout out to Paulette Anderson. But sometimes, I guess the analogy I'm trying to make here is, you're looking for, maybe you were saying you don't want a culture guy because we just got done with the culture guy, but maybe that's what you really want. It was just the wrong culture guy. And maybe stability. You gotta look into what you're really trying to hone in on when you're finding a romantic partner, a coach, and any of those types of things.
I think me and Q reached a middle. To me, if you're going the culture guy, you keep Antonio Pierce another year. The quarterback thing is probably not going to be figured out this offseason. He had a bunch of bad breaks with all the defensive injuries. If you're going culture, to me, just run back AP, try to get in some better coordinators. I don't love that idea. I like some of the other names we've thrown around. One guy we haven't thrown around that I'm wondering if they're going to interview, Todd Monken, I'm really high on. What he did with Stetson Bennett at Georgia was amazing, and he's raised Lamar Jackson another level. I'd love to see him come in. Talk about confidence. Some of those things we're talking about with Pete Carroll fit a lot with him, too. I'd like to see him get it.
He's got familiarity with Spytek.
Yeah.
They're familiar with each other.
Go. Okay, guys, up next, it's prediction time. The panel is putting on a prediction on who will be the next head coach for the Raiders. Our panel gives us their thoughts after these words. Welcome back to Sin City Beat. Well, the next head coach of the Raiders would be the 26th head coaching hire in franchise history. Note that Art Shell and John Gruden were both hired twice. So who will number 26 be? It's time for the panel to make their predictions. So, Case, I'm going to start with you. Who will become the next head coach of the Raiders and why?
Well, the first thing you should know about me, even though I've gone against him the whole time, is I am a betting man at heart. I'm as much of a bettor as a writer at this point. And if you're making me bet who it's going to be, I have to say Pete Carroll. He's the leader right now. But I will say every hour that passes, every day that passes makes that a little bit less likely. If he was truly the 1B to Ben Johnson, he would have already been hired. I think they're going to bring Spytek in, maybe look at some other options. But I think Pete Carroll's your favorite right now.
Okay. Mark, what about you?
I said from the outset that Carroll was, and I had just a gut feeling on it that he was going to be the guy. I just never bought Ben Johnson was coming here. It just never made sense to me. But I agree with Case. The longer we go, the more iffy it becomes. But right now, I think that's my money.
Okay.
Well, I think it's going to be Pete Carroll. I don't think that the time that they're taking is going to matter. I think it's going to happen probably by the end of the week or the weekend or whatever the case may be. I don't see a lot of teams talking about Pete Carroll right now, right? I mean, it was the Bears and the Raiders, and the Bears already have their guy in Ben Johnson. So the Raiders, as Case said, they're going to bring Spytek in and probably talk to a couple different people. I'm not going to rule out Liam Cohen, and this is why. He comes from Tampa Bay, where John Spytek comes from. I know that he turned down the Jaguars. Who wouldn't, right? He turned down the Jaguars and went and got a contract extension in Jacksonville and said he's going to stay there. But this could be a head coaching job, so this is a promotion. So even the contract extension he signed doesn't really matter. He could still take the job, and Spytek could say, hey, look, man, we got this signed, sealed, and delivered. I'm here. It's you for the next 4 or 5 years. Boom, let's do it and make it happen. They still need a quarterback.
There's a lot of synergy there. Let me ask you this. My prediction, I love a good story.
I know where he's going already.
I
know where he's going.
Dion. Prime time, baby. Is there any chance? I mean, come on. We still have the Cowboys that need their head coach. We have the Raiders. This is very Raiders and Cowboys-esque to get a guy like Dion here.
I knew how bought in you were to this. I think the last show we did. I don't think it was on camera, but I said it's not going to happen. I don't think there is for Dion. You jumped down my throat. You couldn't believe it. I don't think they want Dion. I honestly don't.
I think Dion and Pete bring a lot of the same stuff to the table. I think it's a very similar. I mean, the only difference is, yes, you got a Super Bowl champ and a guy who's done it and been a head coach in the NFL and has proven it. But if we're trying to go a little bit more Vegas, baby,
it would fit with Raiders history too.
But if Brady's truly basically running things now, that doesn't strike me as a Brady hire.
Brady's his boy.
I think it's the Brady thing. Does Spytek make it less or more likely?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say that Spytek probably makes it a little bit less. But I do think what Case said when he said that the Raiders don't want Dion, I think that was true. I say was as in past tense when Ben Johnson was their number one target, right? I remember hearing a lot of different people around the league, even Pac-Man Jones saying that, he wanted the Raiders, but Ben Johnson's going to be their guy, so that's why they didn't get him. Well, Ben Johnson's not their guy, so maybe there's a chance.
All right, 30 seconds. I think we can all agree on this. We might not agree on who the head coach is going to be, but Mark in Dion's cowboy hat?
You've sold me. Get him the shades, too. The shades and the cowboy hat.
And a rollie.
Go home to Paulette with that look. I know she's
that's not happening.
I know she's going to love it. Guys, I want to thank my panel. Mark, Case, Q. I'm Mike Davis. We'll see you next time here on Sin City Beat.